I 3D printed the best tube diffuser for the Nanlite PavoTube IIs. Now you can do the same. Maybe. All right, people, let's get into it. I am Garrett, and today I'm going to walk you through how I created, in my opinion, the best light modifier for the PavoTubes. I don't necessarily consider this a tutorial because this is a little more involved than your average DIY. That said, if you do have a sense of adventure about you and a 3D printer on hand, feel free to follow along. Everything in this video, including the 3D print files that I have designed, are all linked down below. So should you want to download those are available for free, in addition to all of the nuts, bolts, and hardware that we're going to be using throughout. When we are talking about key lights, we want something that is going to be bright, but we want something that is also going to be soft, specifically in commercial work. The faster we can set up a light, the more efficient that light is to use, and the less equipment required to make it work, the better it is all around. When we're talking about commercial work, we are doing a lot of setups in a very short period of time. And the more we can minimize downtime, the more efficient we can be, the more we can do. And this build for the Nanlite PavoTubes checks all of those boxes. What we are talking about is the PavoTube II from Nanlite, specifically the 30X. If you've spent any time on the internet, I'm sure you have seen these everywhere. It is a 4-foot RGB WW LED tube light, which means that I can have effects. I can load any color I want to in it. It has an app on my phone that I can use to control the lights together or independently, and of course it has internal battery power, making it a very lightweight, versatile fixture that I can quickly set up, move around, and tear down without much delay. First up, we need this mounting plate. This is a simple plate with a baby pin stud on the back. For the example I'm showing you, this is a 3-inch stud. This is going to be too short. I would recommend a 6 or a 9-inch stud off the back, entirely up to you. I use the 6-inch personally, but it gives me a little bit more flexibility when mounting this onto a C-stand than the 3-inch. But for this example, we're gonna use the 3-inch. The next piece of hardware you will need are 2 1/4-20 thumb screws. This will be explained here in just a moment. Next, we're going to need 6 1/4-20 nuts, as well as 4 1/4-20 bolts. This is the hardware we're going to need for the mounting bracket, and these are the 2 3D printed parts that I have designed and printed. The idea behind this design is that you don't need any glue or additional mounting. You should be able to use just what is here in your mounting process. This first one is what actually mounts onto the plate. This is all measured for this Avenger plate. That said, it may not fit perfectly into the holes on the plates that you have, which might just require a little bit of additional drilling in that to get it to line up perfectly. I did my best, it works on all of mine, but I don't want you to get it and be like, oh, Garrett, it doesn't fit perfectly. Just drill further into this and you'll be fine. So this then mounts onto here, right? That's the first piece. And you can see, of course, with these 2 trays, this is where the Nanlite PavoTubes would sit. And then of course we have the top cap here, which is then what holds it all into place. So then that way, of course, the tubes don't fall out, twist, roll around, all that kind of thing. So the way we assemble it is actually quite easy. You'll see at the top of our base bracket here, we have 4 holes here that fit perfectly for the nuts there, as well as 2 on the back side here for our thumb screws. So it is a snug fit, but the way that we're going to do this is we're simply going to set this down. We're going to put these into place like that and press them in. The idea being that they are loose enough that you can push them in with your finger, but they are also tight enough that you're not going to have to worry about gluing them into place. So they set in like that on that side, don't fall out, and then we do the same on the back side here. Now, if you push them in like this and they don't go all the way to the bottom because they are too snug, and this is true for both the tops and the bottoms, you can simply just take this thumb screw, put it through the hole in the front there like this, and then just keep tightening. And what that's going to do is that as you tighten, it's going to pull that nut down to where it's supposed to rest all the way inside this guy here. So now you can see we have the 4 nuts rested inside there, and then the 2 rested in the back there. Now that I have all of the nuts in place, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this onto my plate here. And the way we do it is we set this down, we line up the holes here on the inside like that, and I take my 4 bolts and I twist them into place. Once you have them all tightened down by hand, then you want to go through with a hex key and actually tighten them up. Now, you want them to be snug, but of course, because this is a 3D printed file, you don't want them to be so tight that it's actually going to pull or rip them apart. The idea is now that I have these tightened down, they won't come off, they don't become loose, you just leave those mounted as is, and this bracket is standalone. Now, to take the top part of the mount here for our trays and to put them into place, I simply just line it up, I take my thumb screws here, I drop them down into the hole like so, and I tighten like this. One on this side and one on this side. I initially designed it with one in the middle, but it didn't prevent any of the fixtures from twisting. So the nice thing is with this is that there are no twisting. And you can see here, I have room for both of my tubes. It is not going anywhere. It's not going to twist. It's not going to fall out. And of course, because this is 3D printed, we do have to be careful with heat. The great news is because the Nanlites are all LED, they don't generate enough heat that it is going to mess this up. I simply printed this in PLA, if you're big into the 3D printing world, but you don't have to print it with PLA. You can go with something more heat resistant should you need to. That said, I have not run into any issues with this. Now that we have the mount built, we are moving on to the end brackets. For that, we are going to need to have 2 more thumb screws for 1/4-20s. These ones are much wider as well as being much shorter. Again, links in the description below. The reason why I like these ones, not just the length, but I also like that it also keeps a 1/4-20 available on the outside. I haven't exactly had a need for that yet, but I do like that that's available. You are also going to need 2 cake plates or these flat white cake plates. They're for tiers in a cake. These are the cheapest things that I could find, but these are 1/8". They are plexiglass and they are solid white. In addition to these, as you can kind of see on them, we then need the printed parts. It's one part, but we print it twice and it looks like this. Okay, this is the important piece of how we get the end caps to mount to our Pavo tubes. You can see here that I have a small hole here, and then I have this dome hole on the outside. This is the outside of the plate. It is curved for that 10-inch circle there. And then on the inside, you can see here that I have these 2 octagons. These are the same as the end caps on our Pavo tubes. As you might have guessed, one side of this is for our power port and DMX, and this allows us, like this, to have access to both of those ports while this thing is set up and moving, which is fantastic. And then on the other side here, right, so if we have the second one in tandem, it is for our 1/4-20, like so. This is also why we have this thumb screw, so we can go straight through the plate and then in securing our end caps to our brackets. Important thing to note, when you are going to be mounting this 3D print into your cake plate, right? It just sits here and goes like this and mounts on into place like that. Before you glue this into place, it is important to mount it, mark off your holes, right, for your ports, take this back off, drill out your holes based on to where you marked them off with a pen, and then glue this on. If you don't, and I'm saying this from personal experience, you mount this and then you try to drill your holes, you're either going to crack this plate, crack the mount, or break the glue that holds this onto this plate. Now for this, I just used JB Weld. It doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be functional. All I did is I took a toothpick and I smeared it on the inside of this piece, and then I just pushed the plate into place. I then just took some gator clamps, clamped it down on either side, left it overnight, came back, and you have this wonderful thing here, times 2, okay? They should look identical, right? We're gonna have the ports on the same side, and the idea is that then when you have it this way, we got quarter 20 and power port, and then quarter 20 and power port like so. You can see why it's a little bit more involved. We're about to get even crazier, but this is kind of why it's like, you can do this if you want, but this is just what I did. So for your end brackets, we have the 2 cake plates, we have the 2 3D printed parts, and we have the 2 quarter 20 thumb screws. The third and final piece in creating our diffuser is the diffusion, obviously. And this is where we kind of go from the world of DIY into something that's a little bit more involved. My good friend Ben, if you want to see some unhinged short form content, links down below to his channel, is a seamster, right? He sews. So I recruited him to help me sew this fabric. If you don't have a friend who sews, get better friends, but also you can use cloth adhesive tape. Here's how we build the diffuser. The first, I just got some raw diffusion fabric online, links below to that, and I mapped out a 10-inch circumference diameter, 10 inches, right? The cake plate's a 10-inch cake plate, however much fabric I needed to get around that thing, right? And I put that together here, and I added about 3 inches on either side, both the left and right sides. On the seam side of our fabric here, there's a couple of things. The first piece that is important to note is that in the very middle, there is a hole. That hole is intentional. If you're going to do this, make sure that you leave a hole on the seam side of your diffusion. And the reason why we have to have a hole is because our actual mount has to come out somewhere, like this, right? But we still need this guy to be able to poke through. Now, I went through and I added zippers on either side. You don't need the zippers. The zipper just makes it really easy for me. Even when the light is set up, I can just unzip, tweak the thing that I want to, zip it back up, be moving on my day. Not important. If you're taping instead of sewing, definitely don't try to do this. This was just something that I did for ease of use if I'm not using the app. At the end, and this is true of both ends, we have folded over the fabric, sewn it together, and put a shoestring or a drawstring in the middle of it. And then of course we have a brad here, which I can push in and cinch up. And now that we have all 3 of these parts built, let's talk about assembly. To begin assembly, we take the bottom half of our mount and we lay in our 2 Nanlite PavoTubes into it. Now, I go through and I use a little bit of spike tape and I mark the middle of the fixture. This just gives me an approximation to know that I've kind of centered the light into the mount. I then, once I have that, take the top part of the tray and I screw those into place with those 2 thumb screws, giving me a basic roughed in idea of how this light is going to be set up. Before we put the end brackets on, now is when we need to take that diffusion cloth and we need to slide it over the fixture and make sure that our post is actually sticking out through the hole in the back. This is also where I take the light and then I put it onto a C-stand just to make it a little easier to manage. You don't have to, you can do it on the floor if you want to, but this is just how I do it. With the Nanlite PavoTubes secured into the tray and our diffusion sheet kind of just blanketed over it, mounted in a C-stand, I can now go through and mount the end brackets on. The way we do that is we simply rotate the Nanlites to make sure that they fit into their respective octagons. We press the end cap into place and we tighten with our thumb screw, doing this on both sides, ensuring that everything is positioned correctly. With that assembled, we can just take our diffusion, pull it over the end, cinch it down on both sides until we get a really nice, soft yet firm tension on that, giving us both the shape and the diffusion that we're looking for. Once you get the hang of it, setting this light up takes less than 5 minutes. If you have more than 2 PavoTubes, you can either create multiples of this modifier, or you could do what I do, which is just swap out the individual tubes throughout the day, so that way some can be on chargers and some can be up and running. We do have the option for hard powering that, so if you do want to run mains off of it, we can plug that in on either side, but I do love the portability of this. Oftentimes when using this as a key light, I'll simply throw it on a rollie and I'll be able to move that light very quickly from place to place, changing the angle, changing the setup, the intensity, the color, everything in between. I hope you found this helpful, and if you did, do me 2 favors. First, give this video a like. That way it helps the algorithm say, hey, this is cool, or whatever. Secondly, comment down below either a question, a comment, something to do with this modifier, how you would use something like that. And again, as always, all the links to everything we talked about are below. Not a tutorial, kind of a tutorial, but there we go.